So since you guys have been asking, I thought I would give you a quick tutorial on how to do one of these little fabric hearts that I've been making that you guys have all liked. They're really simple because you work with felt, and felt is really forgiving as fabric. It's easy to sew and manipulate. This one has a felt back and a felt front with a cutout, and then inside of it I put a scrap of vintage fabric, and then I sewed along the side some trim and some buttons to decorate it. The stitches are real simple. This is just a blanket stitch, stitching the inside scrap of fabric to the cutout hole of a heart, and I also did a blanket stitch on the outside. So what you'll need is some felt, some old vintage fabric that you're feeling okay about cutting up because it's not in good shape. Of course, scissors. You'll need a pen or a pencil to trace your heart shape, and you'll need some embroidery thread, some pins, and a couple of needles. These hearts shapes are from a Valentine kit that I bought at a thrift store. Really all you need is some heavy cardstock or cardboard fabric, and then 2 sizes of hearts, and you'll use those as your template. So just to get going here, you can fold over your fabric so that it fits your heart. And I always try to get the heart as close to the edges as I possibly can, so I use the least little bit of fabric that I have to use. And then just go ahead and make a quick cut down to what you're going to be doing. And then just on one folded side, go ahead and trace your heart shape with your pen. And once you get the shape, you can just go ahead and cut it out through the 2 layers of fabric. And don't worry if you got it a little close like I did there, because it's a very approximate. I don't make my stuff very exacting. If you want to, you can just cut it more carefully than I did, but if you're like me and you just want it to look free and easy, you can cut it as wonky as I just did. And later on you can do the trimming. So now you have your 2 pieces of your heart shape, and take one of them, and one of them is going to become the front, and you're going to cut your little insert out. So you just go ahead and trace around your smaller heart. And then what I do is I just fold it in half and make a little slit there so that I can fit my scissors in. And then I just cut around that inside shape of the heart as closely as I can get it. And now I have my heart cut out. So I chose, since I'm doing red this time, I chose this pretty tattered table runner. It has some nice embroidery on it, and I kind of looked around like this, and I'm pretty sure I want to put make it come into my heart right around there. So I think this gives me, you have to play with it a little bit, you know, just get it to the point where you feel like you're getting as much as you want of the stitch design that you want to salvage. And then you just go ahead and take a couple of pins and pin it in where you want it. And since it's the insert, all you really have to do is make a rough cut. You can salvage the rest of it later, but for now you can just make a rough cut. And this is what you'll do. You'll start sewing the fabric to the inside using a blanket stitch. So I've got my needle threaded with my embroidery thread, and some of you guys are probably much better than me at stitching. I'm kind of a novice, but the blanket stitch is one of the easier stitches. You just go up through the back and then come down in front. You want the stitch to show nicely, so you're not worrying about not having it show. You come up close to the first stitch is always really hard for me. I don't know, like I said, maybe you guys are better than me, but I like to come up through close to that first stitch, and then you stick your needle through that loop you already made, pull it through, oops, pull it through, and then you make your second stitch. That's going to show on the front. Whoops, pull it through, come up behind it and pull it through. Oh, of course you're going to get tangled, because I always do. I tell you, I am definitely not an expert, but if I can do it, you can do it. So when you pull through, you start to make this nice little squared stitch. And you just keep going like that all the way around the inside of your heart. Get a nice little stitch going. And once you get to the point that you're all finished sewing your heart, go ahead and make your last stitch and tie a knot on the underside. And at this point, you can go around the back and cut away your excess of this part of the table runner that you don't need. And it doesn't have to be fancy because no one's going to see this side. Now you have your two sides done. Now what you're going to do is just go ahead and pin those two sides together and then decide what kind of a stitch you want to do on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way around and leave about this much of an opening on the side so that I can stuff it full of fiber fill or polyfill or stuffing, whatever you use to stuff your things. I think I'm going to go ahead and do another blanket stitch for the outside stitch as well. So the same idea, you just do your first stitch, Oops, I think I was going that way. And keep stitching until you get to that point where you want to leave an opening so that you can stuff it with the polyfill. Just go all the way along. So once you finish stitching all around the edges and you've left a nice little hole for stuffing, go ahead and get your polyfill and stuff your little heart until you're happy with its shape. You could also leave your heart flat if you would prefer, so that it can be sewn onto another piece of fabric or put on the front of a journal as an embellishment. But I do tend to like to pile all my hearts in a basket, so I like them to be stuffed. So I had to start, I ran out of my thread on this side, so I had to started over on this side with a new piece of thread. So I'm just going to, whoops, try not to get all the needles caught in my thread, and just sew my way over to this edge where I stopped on the other side. And since I have these two edges left, I'm just going to snip it and make a knot. Cut away. And there you have your little heart. Now you can leave it as it is, or if you prefer, you can decorate it the way I've done on this one. So just find whatever trim you have that you think you might like to use. For this one, I just took this leafy trim and laid it alongside the side of a heart that was a little plain, like this one is. And I tacked it down with regular sewing thread, not this heavy embroidery thread, just regular cotton sewing thread. And then you could also, if you prefer, do a little design like this and just sew that along the whole edge. I think it gives it a pretty busy look. And then grab your vintage buttons, because like for this one, I sewed some coordinating buttons onto where the leaves were, and you could do something similar with this red one and the leaves, or you could just sew a little length of different buttons along the edge if you felt like it. The possibilities are endless. I hope you had fun watching me make this little heart and that you get a hankering to try it for yourself.